Are you in the market for a great looking trumpet on a budget? Well, today we'll be discussing one of your potential options. Stay tuned. Hey there everybody, this is your host Sam here from the Samuel Plays Brass channel. I hope you're all doing well today and thank you for tuning in. I was not content with the amount of student brass instruments I reviewed during the month of August, for Scholastic Brass Month if you can believe it, and so now here we are, back for part 2 Electric Boogaloo I suppose. Today, taking center stage is the Gemeinhardt TP-200-SP trumpet, and before we take a dive into this instrument and start talking about it, I would like to mention that if you are looking to rent or purchase your own Gemeinhardt brass instrument, I would recommend getting in touch with Clearwater Music where I work. We're a dealer for Gemeinhardt and we always have plenty of them in stock. So if you give us a call during business hours, send us an email, or better yet, happen to be in Spokane, Washington and come down to our shop during business hours, you can get your hands on your very own Gemeinhardt trumpet. And one more thing before we get started, I'm trying to hit 10k subscribers on the Samuel Plays Brass channel by the end of the year. I think we can make it with your help. So if you go on to enjoy this video, make sure to scroll down and check to see that you're subscribed to the channel. And if you happen not to be, like a lot of my viewers, please consider doing so. It's a small gesture with a huge impact, so thank you for considering. With that, let's pop the latches on this awesome case and start looking at the Gemeinhardt TP-200-SP. At this point, I'll be turning it over to the Sam over in the shop to give us a quick visual overview. Take it away, Shop Sam. Thank you, Studio Sam. The Gemeinhardt is a very nice looking trumpet and it draws some clear inspiration from the Bach Stradivarius line. For instance, this iconic dual bracing on the tuning slide and lead pipe here. The tuning crook here is a little bit more squared off, just like it would be on a Bach trumpet, and that helps to add a little bit more resistance and security in actually slotting the notes right on their pitch center, which is helpful. Around the back here we have some Bach elements and some elements that are drawn from other brands. For instance, this stop screw here would normally not be found on Bachs. There are plenty of other brands that use it, such as Yamaha and the like. But we've got, the Bach-like bracing on the third slide there. And third slide comes with a fixed ring, water key. Main slide has a water key. First slide has a thumb saddle. And both of these are fixed, but they're also in a very good placement compared to some student trumpets I've played. Some of them tend to have the ring too close or the saddle a little too far for my liking. And honestly, this feels really good. My hands are not too much larger than a 5th grader's hands, so it'll work just fine for a beginning student or even a more advanced player. Nobody should have too much trouble with this grip. And the slides have these nice little rubber O-rings on them to dampen the noise. Mechanically speaking, everything on this horn is quick and quiet, which is really nice. And honestly, it's a really, really great looking horn for a student, and it looks just like some of the real deal trumpets, if you will. But of course, that's not the only criterion upon which we judge a trumpet. I'll turn it back over to Studio Sam now to explain more about the playing characteristics of the Gemeinhardt. Thank you, Shop Sam. We're now once again live at the studio where I would like to talk a little bit more about Gemeinhardt as a brand. Kurt Gemeinhardt himself is a notable flute maker who started off in Europe handcrafting flutes and eventually moved to New York, where the company that formed in or around his name began importing brass instruments from presumably a factory in China. Now, from what I could find online, there is surprisingly little information available about this, but essentially what Gemeinhardt is doing is partaking in the fairly common modern practice of stenciling brass instruments. Basically, a factory in China or some other region will mass produce these trumpets or other brass instruments and then sell them wholesale to companies like Gemeinhardt, who will typically either have a say in the way the instrument is designed before it is built, or on the tail end of things, they will actually take these already built instruments and modify them and quality test them in some way, or perhaps a mix of both. And so essentially, these companies are supposed to provide you a Chinese-made instrument on a fairly good budget, while still ensuring that you don't potentially end up with a fairly poor quality instrument, which can happen in my experience. Here are two horns to my right here. This one is designed and imported by John Packer in the UK. It's a fairly affordable brass company, and this student model cornet was made in China, but was quality tested and whatnot fairly rigorously in the UK, so that I was able to end up with a very nice cornet for the price. I personally got it used for a real pittance, but so it would have cost a little bit more originally. But this E-flat trumpet, which I acquired for a similar price new, straight from the factory without any company stepping in to put their logo on it and do some quality testing. It's a real dog by comparison. It doesn't play with good intonation, doesn't play in tune with itself, and doesn't have a very good sound either. And so, while correlation doesn't automatically suggest causation, we have here a Stencil instrument that was imported and quality tested that plays very well, and one that was not, that really doesn't play as well. So essentially that's Gemeinhardt's mission. Find you the best of the cheap instruments and provide them to you at still a fairly affordable price. Now, while I did mention that the TP-200-SP draws a fair amount of inspiration from big-name trumpets like the Bach Stradivarius and the way it's designed, there are a couple of giveaways on it that really suggest Chinese origin. For instance, the water keys on it look a little bit tacky in the way they're designed and put on the instrument. That's definitely not a design you see outside of China. And also the lettering and numbering, the serial and valve numbers, are kind of laser engraved in this interesting sort of font that some might consider a little bit tacky. So if you don't look too closely, these definitely are not noticeable things. I mean, from far away, it might just look like a Bach Strad to most people, but in any case, there are a couple of design elements that definitely suggest stencil origins, most likely in China. When I did some more rigorous playtesting on the Gemeinhardt TP-200-SP, I found it to be a great playing student horn with nice response and clarity. The whole register responded well, the low notes were a little bit better than average for the typical Chinese horn, some of which really stuff up on me down in the bottom register, and the high notes were phenomenal. I didn't even have any complaints on double C, which is a note I can't usually center very well. Another thing is, it's surprisingly easy to play softly on, which is interesting considering a lot of Chinese-made trumpets really respond a little bit like a truck. You know, you step on the gas pedal and they take a second to get going. When you throw the dart, it takes a while to get sailing. And so that really affects playing at soft volumes most, but the Gemeinhardt seems to do fairly well there, except for one thing. As per the physics of any vibrating tube, whether made of brass or trumpet-shaped or otherwise, there's a certain amount of notes called the harmonic series which you can hit without the assistance of valves or anything fancy like that, and the harmonic series has its own set of quirks. Not all of the intervals are perfectly in tune with each other. For instance, if you take a trumpet and you perfectly tune its C in the middle of the staff, just an open note, the E and G partials just above it might not be perfectly in tune. The E will tend to sag flat, and the G will tend to sail pretty sharp. This varies on different trumpets, and you kind of have to get used to each trumpet's tendencies. For instance, my state-of-the-art Yamaha 8310Z is hardly flat at all in the E partial, and the G partial is a little bit sharp, but I can easily lip it down to where it needs to be, regardless of the style and volume at which I'm playing. Whereas, for instance, that E-flat trumpet, which I mentioned a certain amount of distaste for, that written E and G span significantly more than a minor third of range. They are too far apart. And unfortunately, the Gemeinhardt scores kind of on the worse end of this scale. Once again, the E and G are just farther apart than they really ought to be. I have trouble getting E's, E-flats, and D's up to pitch, and I have a fair amount of trouble getting high G's and F-sharps down to pitch. It's not that big of a problem if you're playing on the louder side of things, but when you play softly, which I mentioned the response to the instrument was fairly good, all things considered, the intonation is hard to correct. I mentioned that the squared-off tuning slide on the Gemeinhardt helps to sort of center the notes a little bit more firmly and give the instrument a little bit more of a stable feel, but unfortunately, if the instrument feels stable in the wrong places, that's not good. In my personal experience, with very few exceptions, Chinese-made trumpets tend to play with a very bright tone quality. This is the case for the Gemeinhardt, so no surprises there. What also happens to be the case with many Chinese trumpets is the fact that they not only have a bright sound, but a sort of thin and shrill sound, which is a consequence of too many higher frequencies in the sound, and not enough presence in the mid to low frequency ranges. In this case, for the Gemeinhardt, I think it has a much better presence and breadth of sound than a lot of Chinese trumpets I've played. It's got a little bit more presence in the mid-range frequencies, and so I think it is a little bit less ingratiating on the ears than the typical Chinese trumpet I've played. And while I mentioned in copious detail the amount of trouble I had with the intonation at softer dynamics, I was very impressed with its subtlety of sound when played very softly. In general, it's got good clarity and a very ringing tone quality that seems to echo around the space pretty much no matter what style you're playing, even when playing faster and technical passages as shown here. And so what we get with the Gemeinhardt TP-200-SP is a fairly solid student model or learner horn that I am comfortable awarding the SAM seal of approval, although we'll make it a little bit smaller because I'm not as ecstatic about it as some of the instruments I've reviewed lately. I do prefer a solid Getson student model or Yamaha student model trumpet, and on that note, some of Yamaha's student line, their Advantage line, is now made in China. You can check out a review of the Advantage model trumpet. It's a really cool horn. But in general, Chinese-made instruments have really improved even over just the past 5 years or so, let alone the past decade or two, and they seem to be on a steadily improving trajectory. There have been a lot of recent improvements and advancements in their technology and manufacturing, and I really hope to see that level of innovation continue. I have a lot of respect for companies like Gemeinhardt that do some collaboration with these Chinese factories because I really feel it improves just general accessibility to decent student brass and makes them a lot more affordable and less cost prohibitive. A lot of people will tell you to just flat out steer clear of Chinese-made brass altogether, and there is of course a level of understandability to this considering just how much your mileage can vary. After all, just in my collection alone, we've seen how you can end up with one of these or one of those, which is not good. But Gemeinhardt's mission is to handpick the best of the herd so that no matter what, theoretically you end up with a fairly workable instrument on a good budget. As a result of this quality testing and stamping the Gemeinhardt logo on the bell, the price does go up a little bit, but in my opinion, the reduced risk still makes it significantly worth it. If you're a band director or a music store looking to have several trumpets to rent out to students, you can still acquire these wholesale fairly cheap, and they're a really good option in that sense. I think the Gemeinhardt trumpet targets two specific demographics. Firstly, of course, the beginner or learner players, middle school or elementary school age kids to start off with, and then also the more intermediate or advanced high school or college level players who are playing at a more advanced level and maybe not using this trumpet primarily, but rather as their secondary or marching band trumpet, if you will. Out on the marching field or in certain outdoor gig settings, you may not want to take along your nice Bach Stradivarius or whatever have you, just for fear of it getting damaged, and so it's a lot less risky to take along your Gemeinhardt. It'll still be a very nice looking, shiny, silver-plated trumpet, perfect for the marching field, and it still performs fairly well. You're just not going to damage your state-of-the-art, whatever have you. And do bear in mind that no Chinese-made trumpet, nor any student model trumpet made anywhere in the world, is going to be free of quirks and flaws. Every trumpet at the end of the day has something wrong with it, as trumpet players will love to tell you, and I think the Gemeinhardt scores towards the top overall of the Chinese-made horns I've tried. I've tried many of them and had some very varied experiences, if you will, and overall the Gemeinhardt scores fairly high. There are some intonation issues, but just the fact that it doesn't have that typical crass and pinched sound that a lot of Chinese-made student models do, I think makes it a really good option for beginners, and that's what makes me comfortable recommending it despite its Chinese origins. I hope this review finds its place in the world where if there's somebody out there on the internet looking for information on Gemeinhardt, that they might see this video and benefit from it. If you did, make sure to leave a like and a comment down below. We've got plenty more reviews coming up as always, so once again, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. There's plenty more on the way, and you don't want to be part of that vast majority if you're looking to stay up to date on this stuff. Thank you so much for watching. This has been Sam of Samuel Plays Brass, and until next time, we'll see you on the flip side.